the West, or what we call, Western civilization, is basically based on one uh, basic philosophy. There's always been one philosophy, if we want to be really honest, and that has always been the philosophy of Plato. Now, we like thinking of a differentiation between Plato and Aristotle, but Aristotle is basically a variation of Plato, not really a differentiation. Now, of course, there are philosophies that have, um, as variations of the basic fundamental Platonic tradition of the West, informed the latest civilization. And those philosophies we could generally um, sort of put under two names. One philosophy is the philosophy of realism, and the other is the philosophy of nominalism. That is the philosophy that there are ultimately realities out there and in here. And the philosophy that everything is just a name. Just a name.
Is that
The
getting
name,
in?
sorry?
Yeah. Is that getting into another way of saying there are two realities, the physical and the metaphysical? Or is that
No. It's not it's not just that. That's a sort of a phenomenon. Basically, these two ideologies, because at the end of the day, they become ideologies. They start as philosophies, but they become ideologies,
Mhm.
are expressing the same ontological framework, the same metaphysics. It's just a difference in terms of emphasis. Realism stresses the objective. Not that it does not accept unsubjective, but it stresses the objective. And nominalism emphasizes the subjective. So this sort of dialectics, or if you like, pair, traditional and conventional, and commonplace pair we talk about, the object and the subject. This is a sort of tug of war that between the two forces that have formed European philosophy. Now, from a certain point onwards, we dubbed the realistic uh, variation Platonic, and the nominalistic variation Aristotelian. But this is something that happened in the um, late Middle Ages with the scholastics, and it was carried on as a legacy through modernity up to nowadays. It has no basis in the work of the real, okay, Plato, or the real Aristotle. It's just a way that Western thinkers found in order to, they invented it, they found it in order to justify and substantiate their own differences as realists and nominalists, based on, of course, the ontology, the philosophical tradition they were discovering in ancient texts, classical texts, in the late Middle Ages, and of course the period of the Renaissance, and after that till our days. So basically, philosophically, the West has never been pluralistic. Never. It's totalitarian. One philosophy comprises the totality of the Western mindset. That's not the Platonic philosophy. It's not the Aristotelian philosophy. It's a philosophy created on the basis of these figures evoking these figures for purposes of justification, but it's basically what I would personally call a Christianized version of Hellenic ontology. And basically, it's a Western Christianized version of Hellenic philosophy. So, if we want to summarize, this, yes, philosophy has been, underpinning Western civilization, very much so, but it has been doing this job basically in a monophonic way, not in a pluralistic way. Although appearances seem to be saying a different story, but we know that appearances can be deceptive.
Okay, that is surprising to hear, considering the traditional thought is the Western world is created, I suppose, really during the Enlightenment, and it's all about pluralism, and in the modern day conceptions of multicultural, open thinking, the scientific revolution. So it's very surprising to hear that no, it's actually monolithic, if not totalitarian, especially when compared to certain other cultures and civilizations, which we would think was actually totalitarian, and the West was actually the open one. For example, the Soviet Union versus the West, or extremist Islamist forces versus the Western world, and even modern day China and the West. We would typically see those countries or those worldviews as being totalitarian, and the West wasn't, or it didn't used to be. So by your saying the very foundations of the West was totalitarian. Given that totalitarianism, I don't think. Yeah.
If I may, Daniel, just interrupt you. I'm not saying that the West is the only totalitarian paradigm. I'm just pointing out that it is ultimately totalitarian. Not in the same way, but in a similar way to other totalitarianisms. The idea of totality is so appealing, is so lurid, that humans seldom have, resisted it. So,
could that actually explain, with the fall of the Soviet Union, we had the West declaring the end of history, and then we had globalization, and where the Western world spread itself. Would that be a real life indication or example where, yes, at the end of the day, the West was totalitarian? It wanted to totalize the world, and with its adversary, the Soviet Union, fallen, they thought that was the opportunity to do so, and they took it. So in their moment of truth, they actually proved themselves to be a form of totalitarianism themselves.
We could say that, and we could also, say a lot of other things. The thing is, what I want to stress is, and if we just recall, Paddington's The Clash of Civilizations, there has never been a clash of civilizations in such, let's say, neutral terms. It has always been a clash of totalitarianism. Has always been a clash of claims, competing claims of who represents, who exemplifies, and who, at the end of the day, is the legitimate totality.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a totalitarian system, and here perhaps we have to, sort of distinguish between philosophical totalitarianism, if we and political totalitarianism. The political, is a certain mutation of philosophical. And perhaps vice versa, we could say this. But we shouldn't, just think of philosophy and politics being the exact equivalent. They are, related intrinsically, but they're not the exact equivalent. Now, you said before that in the modern world, the postmodern world, we have this so big, huge, emphasis on difference, on pluralism. Yes, we do, but within the frame. The frame is one. The frame of the state of power. How we understand state and power, nowadays in international terms, in global terms. That frame is one. You can play within it in whatever way you like, but you cannot challenge it. It's like, a field of football, or soccer. You play, whatever moves you like. You could be Pelé or Maradona or Ronaldo. You choose your style. We allow you this differentiation, this plurality, but you play according to the rules of soccer. You don't play basketball. You don't play cricket.
Right.
So in this way, the total, any total, not just West total, any total, does not, by definition, invalidate or negate the individual as such. It doesn't. The individual can be whatever it possibly can be, only within the frame of the total. It's not the other way around. Of course, when you have the other way around things, when the individual becomes the total, when the individual, absorbs the idea of totality so much that it embodies it, and it becomes sort of a loose cannon, then practically, it's what we mean when we use the word anarchy. And now you have anarchy. Yeah. Can you have an anarchy-based order? Order.
Yes, I was about to say totalitarianism is a centralization, and if a person embodies the totalitarian, I would think they will become a tyrant. But you're saying no, the other way around, they will become anarchy.
If an individual absorbs, internalizes the total to such a degree, that they become one with it. In ancient Greek thought, political thought, for instance, this was the ideal of autonomy. Anarchy in ancient Greece is not what we call anarchy, in the modern age. Different. Anarchy in ancient Greece is autonomy. It's that you don't have any principle, any power above you. You don't obey to anything that is above you, but you yourself have become the criteria and the source of law. You don't need a law out there telling you what you need to do, because you yourself, you know what to do. You have become, in a way, an embodied law. And you don't need law anymore. This is not an ideal, because it was an ideal. It's not an ideal, a lawless ideal. No, it's an ideal where law, order, becomes one with the subject. In philosophy and basically in gnoseology, we have these systems where the subject and the object become one. And then we have intuition, we have direct, intimate knowledge. In politics, when the subject and the object become one, when the subject, the political subject, and the law, order become one, that's when we have autonomy. That's when we have, in ancient Greek terms, anarchia, anarchy. Now, that's not the case, of course, in postmodern or late modernity. But I'm just saying these things so we don't take for granted that totality just dispenses with the individual, the subject. No, at all. Not at all. It's just a new sort of reshuffling of all these things. Now, which totality, if we want to, go into evaluations, which totalitarianism is worse, that's not an easy question,
Well,
but it depends on the context.